This is another episode 5 of my series today on forbidden knowledge. Now, we've been talking about smoke screens, which is, the idea that if you tell enough of information, even if the information doesn't really fully connect to one another, you kind of make a net of information that you call science, and it's in your head. And it's little snippets of this, that, the next thing. It's not the full story. The full story is impossible to get. Even when you do your research, you really can't get to the root of it all. Because, the scientists, sometimes they talk, and you can watch two PhDs talk about a subject. And when they start quoting sources that you don't have access to, and in the end you come to the conclusion that even if I'm following two scientists debating a topic, I can't come to a truth. But I was talking about how big pharmaceutical companies send their drug reps in to bribe doctors into prescribing that particular company's drugs. And then I want to get into even deeper conspiracy, we're going to call it. Now, some people say as soon as it's conspiracy that it's a conspiracy theory and it can't possibly be true, and they tune out. And I want to tell you, if you're one of those people, you're an idiot. Because human history is full of conspiracies. Full of conspiracies. It's a human truth that humans tell lies. And the conspiracy is an agenda to pull the wool over people's eyes, to make them believe in untruths. Because the agenda said, if I tell this lie, there's going to be something in it for me. And in the case of big pharmaceutical companies, if they tell enough lies, it's enormous profits. Unbelievably huge profits. And everyone knows that, business is all about profits, the bottom line in the end. So, if you're wondering why we talk about why there might be conspiracies, it's because of money. Money is a really big driver of conspiracies. So, say for example, you make money, you're a pharmaceutical company, and you make money by testing people. Every time a test is used, you get paid for the test, and you make a profit off that test. Well, business being business, you want lots of customers. Because the more tests you sell, the more money you make, which means every quarter you get to report your profits to the investing population, who are going to buy your stock if you've had good profitability, and they're going to dump your stock. Now, if you're the CEO or the management or even the sales reps of a company, you know that you're only as good as your last sales numbers, which come out every quarter or every month, perhaps every day, perhaps. How much did you sell today? What'd you do? It's all about the sales. And, yes, there might be regulatory authorities, but what's more important to your job? Well, you're not going to have a job if you didn't make the sales. And, the regulatory authorities, we got to how are you going to deal with regulatory authorities? Well, you can come up with honest reporting for them. It costs you a lot of money, and it might mean that you're going to not make as many sales because some of your stuff that you've been working on, investing in, it doesn't work. The studies say it doesn't work. So you might have to put it on the shelf. In other words, we did a lot of research into AZT, one pharmaceutical company did, for whatever reason, and they stopped doing research on it because they didn't have any scientific studies that said that it worked against any diseases. So it was sitting there. And then Not exactly sure how this all happened, but it ended up on mainstream news that there was a new virus that was supposed to be the cause of this supposed disease that was reported in New York and San Francisco that was killing people. And oh, by the way, there seemed to be a link. It was either people that were getting blood transfusions, or they were from Haiti, or they were from Africa, or they were gay, and they were getting this disease. And, our top scientists from the Pasteur lab in France, or the Americans somewhere in America, were fighting over who discovered this so-called cause of, we're going to call it various things. In the end, everyone called it AIDS. But, they kept telling us that these people were dying of this horrible, dread disease. It kept coming on the news, and the news is, broadcast from New York. And there's an enormous network that goes to every city in town in North America in 1984. And, we didn't have a lab in every town to do the research. It was just reported. And as far as these people that were getting AIDS, well, we had pictures, from hospitals and stories about horrible, horrible people wasting away. And then we had famous actors who were dying of it. Rock Hudson, Tony Perkins, Roddy McDowall. And we were told Magic Johnson, the basketball player, had it, and he was expected to die. But lo and behold, Magic Johnson never died of HIV. Then we were told that there was a boxer who tested positive for HIV, Tommy Morrison. And then he had other tests, we were told, that came back that negative. So he wasn't sure if he was negative or positive, but he kept saying, I'm negative, because he wanted to fight, and you couldn't fight if you were positive. Eventually, Tommy Morrison was reported dead. But a lot of people are reported dead that, you never saw their bodies. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein, I talked about earlier, reported dead in a cell that was supposed to be guarded, but somehow he managed to die. I just come to the conclusion that they're lying. Is it the news media that lies? Pretty much they lie. Is it the government, like, the FBI that lies? Yes. Local, whatever police department that was, whatever jail that was, do they lie? Yes. It seems like there's a web of liars, and, and all these other celebrities that are reported dead. I used to think they were dead, but now I don't think they're dead. I think that they often get reported as dead for one reason or another. Perhaps the actor or the musician doesn't want to be that anymore, and they want to report themselves dead so they can get a separate identity and pretend to be somebody else so they don't have to be known, or some other weird reason. I just think it's weird that, Anthony Perkins, who was famous for the Alfred Hitchcock movie Psycho, he was reported being gay, even though he was married to a woman and he had 2 boys. He was reported to be gay, and he got AIDS and died. And strangely, his wife, her name was Barry Berenson, Tony Perkins' wife. And, they say Tony Perkins died September 12th, 1992, and his wife died at age 53 in the September 11th attacks aboard American Airlines Flight 11. September 11th, Flight 11. Berenson. One day before the 9th anniversary of Perkins' death. What a strange way for both of them to die. I used to think that AIDS was a real thing because I just saw so many news stories on it. But they had to have those news stories out there to get a lot of people to take these HIV tests because they had these tests and you could make a lot of money. And then once they finally came up with different drug treatments for HIV, well, they didn't work very well. The early drugs like AZT that they pulled off the shelf. Apparently it was like supposed to be an anti-cancer drug, but it didn't stop cancer, but somehow it retarded the growth of HIV. Then you look into some of the scientists who were working on it. Well, none of them really agreed on what was going on. But then they had, a drug cocktail that would, if you took the 3 drugs, it would stop HIV. And people that took this drug cocktail would not develop AIDS, even if they tested positive for HIV. So then there was a massive talk about this cocktail in the mainstream news, so that everybody on the whole planet knew that there was this stuff available. And then if you went to the gay districts of any major city, well, in the gay bars there was always some promotion that talked about, you need to go and get tested for HIV right in the bars, and it was a known gay bar, and there would be somebody there who would go around putting these coasters down for your beer or your drink that would say, have you been tested lately? And they recommended you get tested every 6 months, which was, a test. But God help you if you had a positive HIV test, in which case, well, good for you. There is such thing as this drug cocktail that maybe in certain cities your insurance company would pay for. And if you were an American without insurance, then God help you how you would pay for this drug cocktail. Maybe you would never get this cocktail, and you would have a terrible fear that sooner or later you were going to get AIDS, full-blown AIDS, and wither away to nothingness. But if you had the money, or you had insurance, or the government paid for it, you could take this cocktail and it would stop your virus from causing AIDS. And if you had to pay out of pocket for AIDS virus cocktail, I don't know, you might be looking at a bill of $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month for HIV treatment. Now, if you think of the number of people that are submitting $1,500 a month to the drugstore and the drug companies, it's an enormously profitable business. And if you were a scumbag, you thought about ways that you could get people to believe in a non-existent disease, but, if you put enough stories on mainstream media that would put any story up that, if you paid for this story to go up, they'd do it for you. They're all about money too, and, you'd have to just have horrible stories about people dying of AIDS. And, in my town, I never met an AIDS patient. I met people that said, I tested positive for HIV, but I never met anybody who was withering away. But, on television there were stories, famous stories about people who had died of this stuff. So it must be true. And, then every once in a while there'd be some famous person who'd be, they died of AIDS, or it would be in the newspaper that so-and-so, nobody you knew, but apparently they lived in your city and the cause of death was HIV/AIDS. I'm just saying it would be an incredible conspiracy theory to come up with the idea that it was a fake disease, but they had everyone convinced that it was a real disease so that they could make so much money. They would even lie and say people died from it. I'm not going to tell you the same thing happens with COVID-19. But in my opinion, it does. They're lying sons of bitches, and they should be hung by their toenails till they confess to this.